Hello, Barry and James. It's such a great pleasure. We're so honored to have you today. Maybe just before we begin, just let us know where you are. Where are you calling from?
Yeah, I think we're both in LA, right, James?
Yeah, we're both in Los Angeles. We are in different rooms, but we are both in Los Angeles.
Yeah, different rooms, different houses.
Yeah.
Well, I think you know how this goes. I'm just going to ask a series of questions, and either of you can answer or however you like. And we're really excited to do this. So, you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, what is your first aesthetic awakening?
First aesthetic awakening. Take it away, James.
I'll go first. No problem. For me, I definitely have an early memory of watching Twin Peaks, David Lynch's Twin Peaks, with my mom. Oddly enough, my mother, for some reason, decided that was a safe and responsible thing to do with a 9-year-old child, but for some reason she did. And I'm 40 now, and I remember turning the tube television to click onto the channel. I don't remember what it actually played on in terms of what broadcast channel, but that's my sort of early, I would definitely say, aesthetic awakening. Just my memory of that sort of checkerboard floor and the red curtains and all the things that go along with that series is sort of definitely, as a 9-year-old, still with me.
Well, I guess for me, I would say I was in elementary school, and my 3rd grade teacher at the time would ask me what I did on the weekends, and I say, "Oh, I went fishing in the Everglades with my grandma." And she said, "Oh, you should tell the class about it because no one else gets to get out of the neighborhood, out of the projects on the weekend." And so I stood up in front of the class and told the story of my weekend. And I think it was the first time that I remember being sort of elevated as a storyteller or presented as a storyteller, and realizing, oh, wow, there's something, there's a creation here. And it's the first time I ever remember actually thinking that what I said had meaning or had value.
So who were some of your early influences when you were coming of age?
Coming of age as a filmmaker, or coming of age as a human being?
Well, you can answer that any way you like, really, but
yeah, I mean, coming of age as a human being, it was weird. It was like football coaches, because I played sports, and those were the role models I had. And I think that stuff still applies, because I think the way I operate on a set has a lot of inspirations taken from the way my coaches operated with our team. But then aesthetic inspirations, I think, is going to be a lot of overlap, because James and I lived together in college, and James was watching all the cool ass movies, and so he would always show up. "Yo, have you heard of this movie, George Washington? Have you heard of this movie, In the Mood for Love?" And instead of going out and raging on Fridays and Saturdays, we would just be nerds sitting at the house watching Criterion DVDs. What about you, James?
No, I definitely remember those times. And I also remember you having Lynn Ramsey's Ratcatcher DVD. And that was like, I think we sort of were passing these things back and forth and sort of exchanging what we were on to discovering. And definitely all those things for sure. All, early Wong Kar-wai work and yeah, Lynn Ramsey's work for sure. Those are definitely early ones for sure for me too.
Was there a movie that changed your life between before and after?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
James, take it away.
I mean those same ones.
I've seen a theme.
Yeah, I mean those same ones for sure. That we just mentioned would apply. I also remember watching in the theater. This is before I met Barry as a teenager. My friends and I sneaking in to watch Larry Clark's Kids. And that was something that I remember, because at that point of my life, I was like an angsty little teenager skateboarding down San Francisco streets. And it just related to me at a time in my life where like, oh, I could be involved with stories as a filmmaker later in my life that related to what I'm doing in my current life. I think that relationship, just seeing that on screen for the first time was kind of a big deal, because then it gave me sort of the feeling of license of just like, oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe I could create something possibly.
Yeah. And I was obsessed with the short films on the Lynn Ramsey DVD, on the Ratcatcher DVD that James is talking about. I just remember, because I didn't know a lot about cinema at that point, and I didn't realize you could make films that way. Her films were about people who felt like they were from the world that I was from, even though it was completely different language, or same language, but way different accent, in different country. And yet, the way she was approaching her stories, I thought, oh, that's approachable for me, and I thought it was also extremely beautiful.
Do you see your work as being autobiographical?
I don't think so. I mean, not in the literal sense, not in the actualized sense. But I do think there's a lot of us in the things we make. You know, just like in the same way, a lot of the filmmakers that we're talking about, my favorite filmmaker is Claire Denis. Having now gotten to meet Claire and befriend her, there's a lot of her in the things that she makes. There's her DNA is in her work. So in that way, I would say it's autobiographical, but it's not actually our story. I wouldn't say that.
So if you look at the work you've done as a whole, what do you see as the central themes or preoccupations? Is that, I know that's a difficult question to ask an artist, but
I think it's this struggle to communicate and to connect. You know, I think so much of
yeah,
life is about connections, and I think in the work that James and I do, no matter the scale, because now we've completed the show and the scale is just it's pretty ginormous, and yet I still think it operates in miniature. You know, and it's about these connections between people, because I think for the most part that's where life is actually lived. You know, it's in these cross sections of human beings and personalities, ways of life, ways of thinking. And I think that's what the work has been about.
I would say, a word that comes to mind, and I would agree with what Barry's saying, that feels appropriate to me is intimacy. I think like there's an intimacy to a lot of what we're discovering when we're making images, and I think that like that idea about connectivity between characters and connectivity between filmmakers and audiences is something I think is definitely a through line.
Yeah, and it's weird, Gregory, because we're making these things. There's so many people, and intimacy is so delicate, you know.
yes,
And then you got me and James, these dudes walking around with all this equipment, but we're trying to find this very truthful connection, this very truthful intimacy. And so I think the exploration or the excavation of the intimacy, it's almost as much a creation, you know, as the shot or as the scene itself. And I think it's kind of what drives me, you know, especially on the show, right, James? Because I mean, it was massive. It was so massive. And yet you have like this tornado of making, you know, this tornado of craft. And you're trying to just have this one little delicate flower. You're just trying to find the best way to allow it to flourish amongst the madness. And then have the audience not know that everything is so mad in the moment of creation. It's been the thing that's been consistent throughout our work, but as the scale gets larger, it's almost the most difficult thing to hold on to.
right. So tell us about the collaborative process. I mean, you both work together on all your films, correct? Is that right? And you also work with a team of people repeatedly. So tell us how that works.
You know, I'll start off with one of the simple ways it works, kind of involves you, Mr. Crewdson, is, you know, because a director doesn't really do anything. And I talk about communication because a director has to communicate so many things to other people who are actually doing things. You know, I'm not moving any lights, I'm not placing any lights, I'm not delivering any performance, I'm not moving any dolly, but I have to communicate in a way that people understand why I want things to be this way or that way and how I want things to be this way or that way. And so one of the cool things is I have all these images in my head. James is a completely separate human being. He's all these things in his head. The only thing we have that's a central overlap is the script, is the text. It's impossible for me to know exactly what's in his head. And what I love is, James and I come at this from the same place. I mean, we've went to school together. We've been making films together for 20 years, literally half our lives at this point. But I'll always walk into James's office when we're starting a project, and he'll just have all these books. There's just like books everywhere. Like every day there's a delivery. And I'm like, yo, what's up with all these books? He goes, oh, this is Gregory Crewdson. Have you heard of him? No, I haven't. Check this out. He'll just start flipping pages. And now what's in his head and what's in my head, it's coalescing around your work,
That's
or
so
around
nice.
Bill Henson's work,
Yeah.
and in that way, we're developing the shared language. And I think I would say it's the same for everyone on the crew, the production designer, the costume designer. But with James, it's like, it's so intense, it's visceral, because literally it's like the image has to pass from my head to his head, and then the camera gets placed. And so, yeah, I think, again, I guess it's all communication. But how is it from your point of view, Mr.
Well, I would just, yeah, I definitely agree with everything you're referencing, and I would just add, I think what's wonderful about working with Barry is his openness to that kind of collaboration. Because I don't think I've, in the 20 years of working with Barry and knowing Barry, I don't think that you've ever expressed like something was wrong with the part of our collaboration. Like I didn't bring something to the table that was wrong. And it's not, I think that perspective is really interesting and sort of an important distinction to make, because I think what I intend to do, and I think same is true for our production designer or costume designers, and to tend to try to give as much as we can, and for you to sort of guide us through what we're trying to give in some way. I think that's sort of a really wonderful way of collaborating, of just sort of being willing to, both from my perspective, be willing to give, and then from your perspective, to be willing to receive in a really open way, so that there isn't a sense of challenging a part of collaboration, or reacting, like building a wall, so to speak. Does that make sense? I sort of think of like collaboration almost like a potluck. Everyone's kind of bringing a dish to the table.
Right.
That's my favorite version of a good collaboration.
Your work is so extremely photographic, I find, in terms of how you frame and tell a story through pictures. I'm curious how you think about light and color as narrative codes.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you read these kind of books as I read books like this in university, where people would talk about color theory quite a lot, and the theory of what color why a certain color is defined a certain way. And the moment I read things like that, my immediate sort of angsty self thought, that's ridiculous. I just think that's so crazy. How could something that's warm feeling mean the same thing for me as it meant to Barry? I think we're all really personal people with very different experiences, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's wonderful. I like that idea, the idea that we're all unique. And so I think, but that being said, I think at some point I need to make a decision, for example, about what color a lamp might be, or what color the sunlight might be through a window. And I think it's just really a personal one. And to me, it just evokes a certain emotional response. So I just think of it as like an emotional reaction to color. And if we're looking for a scene to feel love filled, then I just think about what color love means, and how to define it that way. Like I think of that on If Beale She Could Talk. That was definitely running through my mind, Barry, when we were talking about what color the lamps were in the living room of Tish's family's home. It was just about my memory of what it was like to be, 15, 16, 17, 18 in my parents' home. And that color of lamp felt right to me in some respect, I guess. That's my memory or my thought about color anyway. It's about emotion. Yeah.
And for me, it's a combination of sort of like feeling almost limited when I first started this. When James and I went to film school, because we're a bit older than the kids I see on the Zoom, we shot everything on film, and
Ah,
you know we didn't have the DIT, and you couldn't immediately pull up the shot you had just filmed, and so I struggled that first semester because I didn't know how to make an image, and I realized very quickly that if I couldn't make an image, my voice would get lost. Um,
mm,
and not that everything has to be about control with directing, but you do have to have some control, you know, over the image because it's carrying your voice. And so I really drilled myself. I actually took a year off from school to teach myself how to make an image with still photography.
wow.
Um, and because of that, it became, I realized with the leap that happened in my work, once I just mastered craft, not mastered craft, but once I got a solid footing in craft, I was the same person, the same storyteller. But now that I knew how to wield the craft, my voice was so different. And it just stuck with me that, okay, the image is extreme. That's why we're making movies and not writing literature, because the image is the vessel that's carrying my voice. So it's always been important. I like that James framed it as being a personal response and kind of getting away from actual color theory. I like to think that when we start a project, the character determines what the color theory for that project is going to be.
Mm,
And a really good example from Moonlight, and also because I've known James so long, we can do this. I mean, we were filming the scene, which just it was like one line in the script, but at the end of near the end of the first chapter, when Little was standing in the hallway and his mom was standing at the opposite end of the hallway, I
right.
knew I was like, I want to look down both ends of this hallway. And I said to James, and I need a light to be coming out of her bedroom door. And I don't know what color it is, but I know it's very saturated. And James went in and he started playing around with certain colors. And then when he got on that sort of like magenta, fuchsia sort of spectrum, I was like, shit, that's it. But it was just like him dialing it in, chasing his emotional response to the color. And once I saw it, I knew what it was. Now, color theory, I don't know what the hell that color temperature means in the sense of color theory, but I know in that moment between the two of us, James understood what I was chasing. And it only took a few moments. And I think if we had intellectualized it and tried to think of the color beforehand, it wouldn't have been as potent. And I think that's the way that both this intellectual but this personal connection to craft and theory, I think it yields some really unique things.
Such a powerful moment. It's so extremely beautiful and powerful. So tell us about the, I guess it's like become somewhat of a signature for you, the kind of close up
Hmm.
on your characters that is just so looking directly into the camera, which is it's become like iconic, and it's such a powerful, again, such a powerful sort of use of like something very photographic and direct, and acknowledging the viewer in a certain way. So I'm curious how you came to that, and how you feel you use it to tell your story.
Yeah, it's kind of happened by accident, although it's in medicine. I didn't realize it was in medicine, James. It's also with my Josephine. I didn't realize it. When
Yeah.
she's at the register and the camera's dying out.
Hmm.
So I thought we first did it in Moonlight, but I've been doing a sample and we've been doing it for a while. I think we've gotten a better grasp on it. And it's kind of cool as you start to utilize craft. It's the same craft, but it's applied differently because the narrative is differently. You sort of get a better handle on what it's actually doing. And I think in this show that we just finished, I think it's the best use of it that we've done in any of our pieces. But the time I remember is Moonlight. When we used it in Moonlight, because it wasn't planned at all in Moonlight. And there just kept being these moments where, because you asked about autobiography before, that's probably the most autobiographical thing I've made as far as my own biography goes. And I could tell there were moments where the audience wasn't getting as visceral an experience as I had as a human being, or Terrell had as a human being living through those moments. And that was when it felt appropriate to literally, they say, walk a mile in the character's shoes. We wanted to have the audience put on Chiron's shoes. And poor James, I mean, man, UG, because the first time we did it on that set, it was in the 3 days when Naomi Harris shot all her scenes. And it was when her and Chiron are in the courtyard, and she comes home and she's about to ask him about the money. And we had done the scene, and we're in the housing project where I grew up and Terrell grew up, and we had everything about it craft wise was right, and it still just wasn't potent. And so I turned to Naomi and James and said, "Would you mind doing the scene directly to camera?" And James grabbed the appropriate lens, which I believe was the 50, or was it the 35?
That's a good question.
That's a long time ago at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
That's like 15 hours of filmmaking ago if you add an
Yeah.
Underground Railroad and Beale Street. But and Naomi, and this is kind of the cool thing about aesthetics. Naomi was very comfortable doing it because she said, "Of course, Barry, Danny did it all the time on 28 Days Later. You know, on this zombie horror film, she had done this technique many times, so she was totally comfortable doing it." And this is where I love what I do, and I love working with people that I know and love, because I only wanted it for this one line. There's a line in the script where it says, Paula looks at him with a glorious smile, a smile that has been forgiven many times over. I just wanted the smile, but they kept going. And Naomi kept doing the scene, and then she turned to walk away, and James went with her. And I'm like, I didn't tell him to go with her, but he went with her. And then she got to the door, and he came around, because now James is Chiron. And if James is Chiron, then the audience has no choice but to be Chiron. It was just one of those really electric moments. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is how you apply this. And then we used it too much in Beale Street, but man, we really found it on Underground Railroad. We really did.
I can't wait to see it. What is your least favorite part of the artistic process?
James Laxton.
Yeah, I'll take the tough one. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably for me. It's probably having to defend choices. You know, sometimes you have to stand up and say, you know, I realize this is a challenge for us on a technical level, but here is why X, Y, and Z, and sort of spell out the reasons why something's difficult. I think I love finding collaborators, and that could be from me, for example, like gaffers or key grips or camera operators that, you know, once you ask something, their initial response is not, oh, that's going to be difficult because X, Y, and Z is like having someone that their first response to a creative concept is like, wonderful. How do we figure that out? I think that's the best version of it. But the hard part is battling through people who may not believe in you quite yet. And that's, you know, but that being said, sometimes that's positive because you then have to explain yourself, and then you have to sort of work through that, and then maybe that changes an idea to a better one. So I say a negative one. Sometimes there's some positive outcomes through that thing, but it is probably my least favorite part of the process.
Yeah, and I have a soft version and a hard version of this answer. The hard version is that, you know, when you release something, it's just always the you know, you can only possess a work of art for so long. Once someone engages it, it becomes theirs. And that's a very difficult thing to process. It always is. I think it always will be. I think the other one is this one's softer, but it's kind of in tandem with James's point. Sometimes on set, in the moment of making, I don't know why, but I know. And it can be very, very difficult, especially on a film set, because everything is about time. Every moment you're not filming something, you're losing the opportunity to film something. And so sometimes it's just that there's an instinct, and I can't intellectualize it. I can't explain it. And this is where it tandems with James. And in order for someone to trust me, you know, as they should, they want to have things explained. They want to understand. But sometimes I just can't. Case in point, if Naomi had not wanted to do that scene directly to the camera, she was well within her rights to not do it. But I knew, I just fucking knew I just knew. I mean, so deep down, I knew. And I knew he was going to be cool with it. Not only did I know he was going to be cool with it, this is what I love about James. I knew he would rise. I knew he would slip into it and he would find a way to make it his and push it much further than I ever could. But it's really difficult sometimes when you just know. Just I remember we made our first film, our first short film, and then I'll step down. We were filming this movie in a laundromat. It's called My Josephine. And we made it after 9/11. And people were saying being Arab or being Muslim in America is the new black. I was like, oh, I know what it feels like to be black. And there was a laundromat in town that had a sign that said, we'll clean American flags for free. I thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to make a movie about this Arab American couple who own this laundromat. And now everyone hates them because of 9/11. And as to show that they're patriotic, they're going to wash these American flags for free overnight. But of course, it's about much more than that. And so we're doing this film, which is partly French and English and Arabic. And we're running around this laundromat. We're doing a night shoot. And James and I paused the set to turn the camera towards the fluorescent lighting. And we have the dolly boom and push into the fluorescent lights. And everyone on set looked at us like, these guys are fucking crazy. Why is 5 a.m.? Why am I wasting my time watching them film a light? But you watch the film and it wouldn't work without that shot. And especially then, shooting on film, I don't have time to explain why, yes, this 30 feet of film is going to be about the fluorescent light. And so, yeah, that can be, oh, those moments, James. Yeah, I'm glad it's you, bruh. I'm glad it's you. Because you always just go.
So what is the best part, conversely?
I'm gonna tell this story because I love this guy. I love this. I make movies with people I love. I'm so fortunate. The best part is I'm trying to think of I have so many stories from Underground, but there's 116 days. James shot it all. I directed it all, but it's 116 days, 450 pages. So it's a lot happening every day. The beauty of it though was because it was so long, if you saw something on day 33 that completely altered what you thought you might do on day 37, if you were willing, you can go in, rewrite it, and now we're gonna do something new. So we filmed the ending of the entire show on like day 47, which was like a Tuesday. And somehow that Friday or that Saturday, I have an idea and I rewrite the ending of the whole damn show, push the pages out. We get there and we're on the top of this hill and the lead actress and this other character who I won't spoil are standing there and they have this new scene. We haven't rehearsed it and the camera's just rolling and I just say action. I haven't rehearsed it. They haven't rehearsed it. James hasn't rehearsed it. And the camera just starts moving. And I'm standing next to James and Tuso's doing her thing. And what she's doing is it's so heavy. I mean, it's literal, but it's so symbolic. And it's like a 4-minute shot. No rehearsed moves, no rehearsed performance. And we're just doing it. And Greg, let me tell you, what's in the fucking show is the first take, the first setup, the first take, unbroken. And when that happens, I'm just like, oh.
Yes.
And I know it can't all be that way. I know it can't all be that way. But when it's that way, because when you're creating art, there's always this thing in the back of your head is that this idea of it's art, it's artifice. And you're trying to push through that. And sometimes when we're working and things are very fluid and everybody's just so bought in. I mean, there's so much of James in that shot. It's so pure. And there's so much of her in that shot. And I just sit back and I go, I am so blessed because there is no way in hell I can recreate that. And that's when it's just like, I mean, that's like the best thing.
Pure magic when that happens, right?
Yeah.
That's very sweet. I'm very, but I would just say, for me, what you're describing is the same thing. Is my same favorite part too. It's on the feet with the actors after just the moment Barry calls action. Between action and cut is my favorite time. Because that's like things happen in that space that is pure, magic. I think magic is my favorite word to describe that time because it isn't something to fully understand. At least to be honest with you, I don't even want to fully understand it.
Yeah.
I want to feel it and know that sensation, but I don't actually really want to understand what happens.
Yeah, man, Greg, when we had a day on set. It was like one of your photos. I'm talking about North Carolina when they're burning the books. We're in the middle of the square. It's surrounded by all these wooden homes, and we're somewhere in North Georgia. The sun has gone down. It's like maybe 43 degrees, and we have this big fire going. And just out of nowhere, this like tull of smoke and fog just comes in, and it just rolls completely over our set. And we have the greatest Steadicam operator in the world, and James is at his wheels with this massive techno crane. And when I tell you, I mean, talk about magic. It was like I turned to James, I was like, "Did you do that?" He goes, "No, I didn't do that." Like I thought he had added the smoke. He's like, "No, that was just it just happened." And I was like, "Well, I'm glad we were here when it just happened.
Oh,
I'm glad we were here."
can't wait to see it. My God. When do we get to see it, by the way?
May the 14th, exactly 29 or 30 days from now, May the 14th.
Oh my God. Okay.
But you might get to see some of those close-ups before then. You might get to see a few of those. Knock on wood.
Please, please, please. So is there a movie or a song that makes you cry?
Oh, wow. Wow. There is a song. I know the song, so I'll say it really quickly. I actually did an interview for Believer magazine about the song. It's by this band called Stars of the Lid, which we used to use to score our short films in film school. And it's called Requiem String Melody. I think it's the most beautiful song ever played. No shade to Nicholas Patel. And yeah, not every time I hear it, I cry, but it takes me to that place. It does.
Well, I know
That's a
which
thing
movie
they do
makes me cry.
Yeah, I'm curious. What makes James cry?
Oh yeah, what movie
Lots of
makes
movies do. Yeah, no, that's a ton, honestly. I think the most recent one, though, is a film that I watch a lot. I don't know why I keep going back to it, but there's a 2-minute sequence in Julian Schnabel's Before Night Falls that always gets me. It's this montage where he goes to this club, and there's this wonderful camera move that sweeps around the club, and there's this beautiful music playing. I can't. What song is playing? Anyway, that song, that clip, and then that film always makes me cry no matter what.
Hey, Greg, can I be honest with you, man?
Yeah.
The last movie I cried in, I'm gonna be honest. There was a
Yes.
BTS documentary on Netflix, and when they play Coachella, I cried. You can ask Lulu. True story. When they play Coachella, I cried. It did. Only because their dreams that come true, and the audience was so. I did cry. I did cry.
Yes.
Like I like legit cried. I mean, it was intense. Yeah. Oh wait, not BTS. Blackpink. It was Blackpink.
Yeah,
The Blackpink. The
Oh, yeah.
Blackpink documentary. Greg, are you a Blackpink fan?
Yeah. I haven't seen the documentary yet, though. I must see it.
Hey, if you're a fan, get ready, bro. It's gonna knock you down, man. It's gonna knock you down.
Okay. Well, one of my movies that make me cry is Moonlight. I'll just say that. So.
As Mahershala says, I apologize, man. I apologize.
Yeah, it just in the best possible way. It just so gets me.
Man.
Yeah. So I'm curious what's on heavy rotation right now. You know, particularly, I mean, I know you've been very, very busy in post-production, but you know, during the quarantine, what have you been watching, reading, listening to?
I haven't been able to watch anything but this.
Yeah.
You know, and working on the score with Nick, that's what I'm listening to as well. The score for the show was really Nick did a great job. It's because she goes through so many different states, and the states are all unique. It's a lot of music because there's a different score for basically every episode. So that's what I've been listening to and watching. I think you've been watching it too a lot, James, but I hope you've been finding a way to watch something else.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, for me, I think for me, it's been a lot of like comfort movies and movies that remind me of like comfort in a way. And for some reason, I don't know why, but well, I do know why. It's probably because it's just about remembering my my youth as a child, but like a lot of Spielbergian stuff, just like old Lucas movies, and just sort of like these old things that I would watch when I was, 10 or 12, and just like it just now feels like mom's cooking at this point.
Close Encounters?
Oh yeah, exactly. That era, exactly. Yeah.
Barry, I love the Wilco remix you did.
Thank you, bro. Thank you,
Yeah.
man. That's my little side hustle. I don't
Yeah.
make any money at it, but that's my side hustle.
So the last question, what advice would you give the students in terms of words of wisdom, advice in general, any general term?
Yeah, I think make it personal and work with your friends, man, and be patient with yourself. That's the biggest thing, you know. I was 37 when Moonlight came out, 36, 37. James was, I guess, 34, 35, you know. That means that it was like 14 years after graduating from film school. So make it personal, be patient with yourself, and work with your friends, man. Work with your friends. Work with your friends.
Great advice. James, you have advice as well?
And I feel the same way. I don't know. This is a weird moment of we're all alone somewhat, and there's a loneliness to that. But I'd also try to. I've definitely tried. I mean, maybe failed at times, but try to embrace that sensation a little bit. And I don't think we'll ever be asked again in our lifetimes to stay home for a year and be by ourselves. And it could be a time to just lean into it and like look inward and find something about yourself that you didn't know before.
Mm.
Well, we're so excited, all of us. The world is excited to see the Underground Railroad, and just filled with anticipation. And can't really. By the way, is it all going to come out at once, or is it going to come out?
It's gonna all come out at once. I do not recommend you watch all 10 episodes back to back in one night. I've done a few interviews with people who did do that, and I am concerned for their health. But yeah,
but we have you here, so tell us your recommendations for watching it.
If I was going to break it up, it would be I'd watch Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and then I'd watch The Great Spirit and the Two Tennessees. And then there's an episode called Fanny Briggs, and if you want, you could tack that one on to the back of the Tennessees, or you can sit that one down and then get into the Indianas. And I would save the last episode, Mabel, for last. The chronology follows the book very faithfully, but we've added quite a few surprises as the book goes on. If you recognize the name Fanny Briggs, then you'll realize what one of those surprises is. But yeah, that's how I would do it.
And was Coulson involved in terms of the project?
He was, but he was off writing a second book in a row that won a Pulitzer. So I would just check in with him if I was gonna make alterations to the narrative or to the characters, and I thought they were dramatic enough or jarring enough. I would always check in with him to let him know, out of respect. And he always said yes, with the one exception. There's one thing we thought about doing that he shot down. Now that I've seen the show, I think he was right to shoot it down. So. Yeah, he was involved.
And has he seen it yet?
He has seen it. Yeah, he's seen it. He's seen it. He saw it a couple of weeks ago, or maybe like a month ago. I mean, shit, I can say he loved it. Yeah, he loved it.
Wow. Of course he did.
I'm very proud of the show, and I think we honored the book in a really wonderful way. But coming off the back of the last adaptation we did, Beale Street, where we were very faithful. I think the balance between faithfulness and creation, we really struck the right tone on this one.
Well, we look forward to it in great anticipation. And this was such a great conversation. I'm so pleased that you both agreed to do it. And as I said, it was like, I'm a huge fan of your work. And so it's very meaningful for me personally.
Thank you, man. It's our pleasure. I mean, we went to Florida State, which we love and adore, but now we can maybe say we took a class at Yale. So I don't know. I think we're coming out on the upside here.
Well, you have an open invitation when we're all back in the physical realm.
Yes, sir. Thank you, bro.
All right,
Thank
man.
you very much.
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
James.
it.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.